Constructive Voices, the podcast for the construction people, with news, views, and expert interviews.
Hello and welcome to the first episode of Constructive Voices for 2023. I'm Steve Randall, and this is the first of our special themed months. This month, we focus on biodiversity.
It is important to make buildings which are climate resilient. And how you do that is really using the data and the science to understand the exposure and the risks and the vulnerability of these buildings.
That's Roberta Boscolo. She's our guest on this episode of the podcast. And of course, Pete the Builder. Peter Finn is here too. He'll be joining me in just a moment.
Constructive Voices media partner in Ireland and the United Kingdom is Construction Industry News. Since 2002, Construction Industry News has been focused on the very latest projects and developments within the UK and Ireland.
Okay, so here we go then, Pete. It's a brand new year. Happy New Year. It's okay to say Happy New Year this late into January, isn't it?
I think we're getting very close to the point where we shouldn't be saying that anymore. But yes, Steve, Happy New Year to you. First episode back. Very exciting stuff ahead. Obviously, everybody has some new perspectives on what they're going to do and the challenges they're going to overcome in the new year. And us here at Constructive Voices are no different. We've got lots of discussions to be had, and we've got lots of exciting news and loads of really good stuff that we're going to be doing this year.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you listen to the last episode we did, we were talking about the fact that we were going to have these focus months during 2023. That's one of the big things that we're doing. And here we are in January. Our focus month is biodiversity. So we're not going in soft and trying to take a low-brow subject here. We're going for one of the big ones. In fact, you know, it's part of the biggest challenge that we have, not just in the construction industry, but in the world, the whole thing of climate change. And biodiversity is one of those things that's so important because it's how the natural world works with each other. And a lot of it we don't even see. You know, it's those insects that are there because something else needs to eat them so that something else can eat them and so that we can eventually eat. The construction industry has such a vital part to play. You know, we've already kind of moved to a position where developers are looking to include lots of green space and maybe even some sort of wild areas and things to help with biodiversity, planting trees, making sure that there's, you know, the natural world next to the built environment. I mean, this is just such an exciting opportunity for the construction industry.
Yeah, without the shadow of a doubt, biodiversity is being given the recognition, and it's certainly being approached from a different perspective than it would have been in previous years when it comes to planning, when it comes to how we engineer and how we live within our built structures and within the built environment. So there's a huge amount of research has gone into the subject, and there's a huge focus gone into making sure that as we build our structures, as we build our homes, as we build our community and our commercial buildings, that we take into account that, you know, it can't all be just concrete jungle and no greenery and no natural environment. So that is a huge focus within the industry at the moment, and rightfully so, because as we know, if you upset the balance of nature, you know, there are going to be repercussions, and it's how we address what we do now is certainly going to affect our future. So, you know, it's going to affect us in a lot of different ways, ecologically, financially, and simply the environment that we live within. So a huge subject. And again, we've got some of the best experts within the industry with, you know, they've literally got a lifetime of experience in approaching these subjects, and they're working for companies and entities within the industry that are really at the top of the game and really know their stuff. So, you know, we've got some great experts coming on board, and in particular, we've got a brilliant interview today that we're going to be listening to now.
Absolutely. Our guest has been speaking to Constructive Voices' Jackie de Burca.
My name is Roberta Boscolo. I am a science lead for Climate and Energy at the World Meteorological Organization. The World Meteorological Organization, and for short is WMO, is a specialized agency of the United Nations, and it is an authoritative voice for weather, water, and climate. The headquarters is based in Geneva, Switzerland, and this is where I live and work since 2009.
Now let's talk about your work. Can you give an overview of your work, Roberta, to our audience, please?
I focus on how to harness the power of climate data and climate information that the WMO generates through the partners and the member state to support decision making in key sectors, and especially the energy sector is my specialty. But in WMO, we have several sectors that we provide services, climate services, and is health, disaster risk reduction, agriculture and food security, water. This concept of climate services is to make sure that the information is used for climate adaptation and mitigation by the public and the private sector. So we generate a lot of data, we generate a lot of analysis and science, but we understood that this science are not value if they are not used to actually make decisions and help to put businesses and private sector and public sector and governments on the pathway to sustainability and climate change mitigation. So we want to build this bridge with the users of this information. And this is why we are, this is my focus, basically, the focus of my work. Really interaction with many users, many stakeholders, and to understand what is their business, how climate is impacting their business, and how we can use this science, this climate science, to help them to mitigate climate change and to adapt to future climate. So our vision in WMO is global. Also, it is important to create capacity, especially in the developing countries. And part of my work is to make sure that developing countries and least developing countries can access all this data, can use this climate data, and can develop the information tailored to their national needs.
This interview is actually the first in our series for biodiversity in the Built Environment Month. Built Environment covers the likes of construction, architecture, engineering, and so on. What kind of stats and scientific information, Roberta, can you offer that will quickly confirm how severe the current climate change situation is?
Yes, we can certainly start by looking at the global temperature, which is the bigger indicator of climate change. We know that we already have an increase of 1.2 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial level of temperature at average at global level. And this is an unprecedented fast increase, at least for the last 2,000 years. Also, with the recent data collected on for the last year, 2022, we know that the last 8 years are the warmest years on record. So this is the big evidence that something is happening. And this drastic increase of temperature has all sorts of impacts in our Earth dynamics, is reducing the extent of the Arctic sea ice, which has reached the lowest level in the last 1,000 years. Retreats of glaciers, also unprecedented in the last 2,000 years. And all of this increasing the sea level rise with an unprecedented rate, at least for the last 3,000 years. A recent scientific article that I just read last week sees that the retreat of the glacier demonstrated that even the most ambitious climate goal which is to limit the temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius, has already locked in the glacial retreat, and almost 50% of the present glacier will disappear. So we can kind of consider also these glaciers as the canary of the coal mine. Something is drastically changed. And also we can go with more evidences that are all in front of us. I don't need to say that, we are experiencing more and more extreme heat, more frequent and intense heavy rainfall. Droughts has increased also in some regions, and wildfire are more frequent, and ocean warming and acidification as well. So these are all indicators that we are monitoring and we are seeing with our eyes. So, and is, giving us the urgency of acting. And just let me finish this by saying that what is the cause of this increased heat? And this is us, is our human activity with emissions of the greenhouse gases that once they are in the atmosphere, they trap the outgoing heat and they warm the planet. So we can do something because we are the cause of this.
As you know, the audience that you're reaching through our podcast and through the roundtable that we'll do at the end of January are the built environment, as mentioned. Now, that particular industry is responsible for 40% of carbon emissions. In a very straightforward way, how can anybody working in that industry collaborate and benefit from collaborating against climate change?
Yeah, very, very interesting question, because I think it just go back to what I was saying. First of all, buildings have a long time life, and so they will go through climate change as well, and it is important to make buildings which are climate resilient. And how you do that is really using the data and the science, as I said before, to understand the exposure and the risks and the vulnerability of these buildings. And this is the bridge that I was talking before. We need to understand and we need to have a two-way discussion and conversation with this community of built environment. They could both helping to mitigate the climate by reducing their greenhouse gas emissions with solution and innovations and be more sustainable. But on the other hand, they also need to increase the climate resilience of the buildings and make this building adaptable to the future climate. I think they have a big responsibility and also a big responsibility to understand the issue and talk with the scientists as well to find the solutions.
Perfect. Now, COP15 on biodiversity had a huge increase in its global profile, but action is still at an earlier stage than climate. Are there lessons, Roberta, from efforts on climate change that can be shared with those striving to get momentum and awareness of the need to act on biodiversity loss?
Yeah, I think actually for some people, they would argue that also the negotiation for climate change are not progressing very fast. And even if we had many more COPs, say, than the biodiversity COPs, we had the last one in Sharm el-Sheikh, there was number 27. And I actually attended this and also the previous one. The climate change COPs is a gathering that actually is more than just a negotiation. On top of the parties that are there, there is other actors that gathers. So while governments struggle to reach a meaningful and bold accord, the other actors, really like businesses, civil society, academy, or NGOs, are pushing for this great transformation. And they are all buying in. They really understand that this is, we are at the crossroads of deciding to be sustainable, to tackle the climate change and the biodiversity, or to really, having a very dark future for our planet. So what I'm saying, at least for the COP, I see this innovative force that is pushing, and this is, I think, where we see progress. So progress is going to happen. I think, and innovation and is going to drive us towards a more sustainable path. For example, innovation in reducing emissions through the harnessing of the wind and the solar potential is happening, despite there is very weak mentioning of coal phase out during, in the declaration. And I did not attend the COP15 in Montreal for the biodiversity, but at least, the climate one, they have a huge areas of pavilions and a lot of side events where people meet and exchange ideas. And I think this is the area, I would say, that makes me more positive and optimistic. Both COPs, biodiversity and climate change, are not reaching bold goals and implementation as fast as the scientists are recommending, in order to avoid the most dangerous climate and biodiversity loss impacts. Change will happen, and we really need to be optimistic and think that they will be also faster, but they will take pace in the future.
Absolutely. I mean, we did an event just after COP26 and followed up, a year later, COP27. And of course, during that particular year, we had the Russia and Ukrainian war, which made a massive impact on the potential progress that had been talked about at COP26. Isn't that right?
Yes, exactly. And, between COP26 and COP27, the geopolitical forces changed dramatically. So there was another addition of this Ukrainian war that I do believe that a good push was an additional push, in the same direction, which might help also the climate change mitigation implementation.
Yes, I think we got a short sort of a shock with that, and I would agree with what you've just said there, Roberta. We're actually starting to build understanding that climate change and biodiversity loss emergencies are very much entwined. We can't solve one without dealing with the other, obviously. So the need for action it's about finding solutions, but also about scientific research to understand the challenges and record indicators of change. Now, your own focus is on climate. How do you see scientific studies of nature helping our understanding of climate change and vice versa?
Yes, there is a lot of work done by climate scientists looking at impacts, adaptation, and vulnerability of climate change. And for example, the IPCC, the Intergovernmental Panel for Climate Change, has published their recent assessment last year in 2022. And they are actually looking at how climate change is impacting ecosystem, biodiversity, and human society. And we also, get indicators for biodiversity. And for example, biodiversity, the loss of that biodiversity is going to be proportional to the temperature increase, putting at risk, for example, pollination, water availability, clean water, clean air, and food security and others habitats. And we see a growing number of scientific studies that shows that increasing temperatures and extreme events change the seasonal timing of key biological events, such as flowering or when animals emerge from hibernation or annual migration, which cause a mismatch with important seasonal food resources. Another example is the timing of fish spawning and plankton blooms that fish larvae depend on for food, and insect availability in the time when the birds are breeding. So the changing of climatic conditions and the warming progressively shifts plants and animals to higher latitudes, higher elevation, or deeper ocean waters. And approximately half of many thousands of species studied on land and in the ocean already show responses of these climate forces, climate cause, with the population extinctions and shifts in vegetation zone. We have many examples. I can go on, but I would just want to say this research is extremely important because it is through these studies that we find out the exposure and the vulnerability of the habitat and ecosystems, and then we can intervene and mitigate the impacts. And I just want to add that a very important thing that IPCC also the working group 2 in the IPCC showed, they presented that there is also there is a limit to effective adaptation. And we cannot prevent all the losses and damage. And for example, above 1.5 degrees Celsius, which is the Paris Agreement goal, the most ambitious goal, some natural solution may not work and people cannot adapt. And many species and ecosystems are currently near or beyond their adaptation limits. So this is important also to take into consideration, and this kind of work and studies are important to highlight these big challenges and these big tipping points.
One thing that comes to mind, because for those people who are not immersed in nature or massively interested in nature, sometimes it's important for them to think about how climate change is affecting themselves directly or somebody within their family. And one of the things that comes to mind with that, Roberta, is the increase in the allergy season that is affecting many, many people globally.
Yes, as I said, impacts of climate change is on the health as well. Heat waves, of course, is impacting a lot of people, especially the most vulnerable, the elderly, and the people with some preconditions. We have, for example, vector-borne diseases, which are driven by climate as well, and some others of pests and locusts, for example, that are more abundant in some climatic conditions. So there is, we could think about really climate change affecting all aspects of our life, and we just need to realize this and to see how urgent it is to solve this problem.
Do you see opportunities for those of us studying nature to adopt technology or methods to study weather?
I think the big difference that I see very important is how weather, for example, is not only research but is also operations. which routinely inform people, in a kind of operative wave through these centers, which are the med services of the countries, which, like in Ireland, for example, they provide information for the Irish people in the country, but they are also connected to data. They have access to data globally. And I think this access to data, the global data, to global products and to innovative products is probably what is missing in the study of nature, in a way, like free data and free access and of data related to nature that will increase the studies, the science, and we also be able to to share data and to do cross analysis with other data. I think this is really important. With WMO, we have data centers that are accessible, open and accessible to everybody. And I think this should be something done also for, say, the natural science.
Thinking about action, Roberta, apart from that, where do you see particular challenges and opportunities?
The big challenge is the time. We don't have enough of it because the changes is really rapid, we can see changes from one year to the other, and we. Even this winter in Europe was particularly mild, like a heat wave during winter. And then the summer was also with drought, a very high temperature, especially in Ireland and UK. So I think, we see these changes happening very fast, but we are not acting fast enough. And this is the big challenge. And together with the lack of time is also the lack of financing to help to advance with adaptation and mitigation. I think, the financial, the capitals are not flowing enough, fast enough to these activities, to these initiatives, and also to support all the communities and the businesses which are innovating in sustainability, for example. I think this is the opportunity is really in supporting innovation for the sustainable future.
Yes, that is an opportunity, but it seems, at least in my point of view, it seems somewhat ironic that we've caused the issue, and money is actually man-made, isn't it? So for finances not to be flowing, or at least sufficient finances not to be flowing in the right direction, seems, well, very, very ironic at this stage.
Yes, and I guess this is the inertia of the system, or some lobbies, some very powerful businesses that are, of course, against and are minimizing the urgency. Climate change is really an issue that, touches a lot of big businesses. So
Sure.
I think this is the reason why there is this slow movement, and the pace is not enough. I mean, maybe you, also myself, we keep reading articles about how much money these big business oil companies have invested in advocating against climate change. So is just rowing against the current.
Absolutely. And I suppose, a realistic person such as myself, who isn't an expert like yourself, I would simply think that is so short-sighted, because all they're thinking about is obviously money and obviously making more money. But at a certain stage, if things continue to accelerate as they have done, particularly in 2022, there won't be any point to any of that.
Yes, and we always say, no, there is no planet B, or we say there is no business without planet.
Exactly.
and this is the point. And this
Yeah.
very short sight, and we really need to have this view, these visions that, make us understand that we need to act now with the vision of the future being a better world for our children and for next generations.
Absolutely. We attended in June of 2022 an event in Brighton in the UK called Footprint Plus, and that was for the built environment sector. And there was a huge amount of realism and positivity there. Just like yourself, Roberta, in terms of some of the positive points you've made during our interview. And that was, a group of all people involved in property, architecture, construction, infrastructure. And that was a place where it was almost joyful to find that there are sections of society, a little bit like what you spoke about in terms of the COP 26 or 27. There are sections who absolutely get it and absolutely understand what we need to be doing,
Yes, I mean, climate change has to be seen as a system, and we need all sort of solutions, and we need all sort of adaptation and mitigation solutions. And all sectors, the most polluting sectors, have an opportunity to rethink, to redesign their businesses, and why not to not only be better, less polluting, but also providing a better service, providing a better future. So I think. If you think there are so many co-benefit of climate change, and for one thing is, for example, the clean air. Urban cities are with these polluting cars. Is also affecting the health and of people, and the clean air is a right for everybody. So there are so many. Solutions that have a lot of co-benefits with many other sectors. And I don't think the business is going, a certain business, of course, has to be rethought. For example, the energy sector, but wind farms, solar farms need to be built. So there is business opportunities there as well.
Yes, I mean, of course, we referenced, the likes of the oil companies previously, but there are absolutely, with any huge period of change, there are always massive opportunities there for those who can see, embrace them.
Yes.
So when we look, Roberta, at the UN Sustainable Development Goals, we see a very long list of different areas where we need positive action and complex interactions between the different goals also. A good example would be the nature restoration efforts that also help with human health that we've touched on, and well-being, and climate adaptation. Now, what do you think, or can you think of examples of big win-win opportunities that could deliver against these multiple goals?
Yes, as you said, there are so many win-win opportunities if you look very carefully, and nature offers a lot of untapped potential, but not only to reduce climate risk and deal with the causes of the climate change, but also to improve the people's lives. And for example, by restoring safeguarding ecosystems on land and ocean, we help plants, animals to build climate resilience. So if we invest in protecting nature and rebuilding ecosystems, both people and biodiversity benefit. And, like flood risk along rivers, for instance, can be reduced by restoring wetlands and other natural habitats in the floodplains, by restoring natural courses of rivers, and by using tree to create shades, for example. Cities can be cooled by parks and ponds, by greening streets and building roofs and walls. Farmers may increase their businesses with climate resilience by diversifying their crops and livestock, by planting trees and bushes on the field for shade and organic manure, like agroecological farming. By increasing soil health, for example, moist soils, organic matter, and combining crops and livestock and natural elements with such trees and bushes. So really, what we call it natural-based solutions they offer opportunities which have several win-win solutions, win-win solutions. And I would say, for my sector, for example, solar and wind energy, they can be off-grid and they can reach the most remote places and provide electricity for education, for helping gender, for example, and also building health, hospitals in the remote places. These are, big solutions that we can deploy.
You mentioned obviously greening cities, and just by pure coincidence, you picked up on my Irish accent, but I'm actually living in Spain, and my closest city is Valencia, which has been named European Green Capital for 2024. And it's an amazing city to go into because they have made that city green so much longer before any of this emergency has been in the public domain for the average person.
And they, as you said, they attract people like you working remotely from Valencia. So they offer something that is more comfort for people to live in rather than big cities and polluted cities. But there are other examples as well. And it is incredible how, governments at level of COP, they are stuck, but cities, municipalities, regions, they are much more advanced. They are much more, they have a bigger visions and they can take actions, and they are not stuck with these all negotiations. This is what I was saying before. You see improvements, you see innovation is in this aspect, in people, and mayor of cities or governor of regions that are taking actions despite the global negotiation is kind of stuck.
Absolutely. Now, one of the challenges that we need all these multiple issues to be acted on really at the same time, ideally, to halt and adapt to climate change and nature recovery. As you mentioned, there's, plenty of positivity, but some organizations aren't acting at all yet. Some are focused on single issues, but we need to share messages that encourage action. But there's a risk really, Roberta, that when people start to open up to this, they're going to be bewildered by the complexity, and feel like whatever we do, someone will criticize us saying, but you're only acting on X, but you're forgetting about Y and Z. Now, as a sustainability influencer, can you give some simple tips for those looking to influence others to act and to act themselves, obviously?
Yeah, well, I always think that for me, at least, undoubtedly, the issue is super complex and so interactive, and for sure, we always, everything we do, we always going to forget something, but this should not prevent. I think for me, when I communicate about science, about climate change, I always start with scientific evidence. So scientific evidence, which cannot be, is not an opinion, is not, I think, and is my opinion, but it is something that is there and is in front of everybody. So I try to always start a conversation with some scientific evidence and say, okay, let's see how this is impacting several other aspects, and what do you do with that, and it is always I think it is important to start a conversation. Nobody has a solution and nobody has the full picture, say, but let's start with what is evident, and let's build the conversation and the advocacy through the science. That would be my tip.
Perfect. Now, Roberta, a very recent article in the Guardian newspaper on the 9th of January reported that the Earth's ozone layer is on course to be healed within decades, according to a UN report. What are your comments about this, Roberta?
Yeah, thank you very much for this question, because I actually did a post yesterday in my account about how, for example, the Montreal Protocol, which was signed in 1987, was actually successful. There was a scientific evidence, the ozone depleting chemicals that we were releasing in the atmosphere were eroding the important ozone layer. And we had all the parties coming together, signing this protocol in Montreal for the depleting substances. And then, the phase out of this nearly 90% of banned ozone depleting substances was successful in safeguarding the ocean layer. So this is, an example of how the world came together to solve this problem, and they succeed. So let's take this an example for climate change and biodiversity loss. As we can do it together.
So that gives us obviously a very good example of hope, and when systems work and people get involved at all different levels in society, what can actually happen, doesn't it?
Yes. I mean, we have the will. This is such a good news, because this article that came out, because it was a scientific assessment that came out yesterday. They say that the ozone layer is on track to recover within the next 4 decades, and this is such an important news, because this ozone layer is in the upper stratosphere, and it helps to ban the harmful ultraviolet rays from the sun. So science was there. They produced the evidence. The parties, the countries realized this is important, and they started to phase out these chemicals. And now we are recovering. Nature is doing their work and is recovering the layer. So yeah, is a very good example of what we collectively as we can do it. And just remember, we just have one world where we live. We don't have a planet B. So, this is the only way to go through.
Absolutely. This is the only way. Now, you're speaking directly to people who are globally involved in what's known as the built environment sector. Roberta, what are your hopes to communicate through this series of interviews, to today's interview and later as part of the roundtable? What are you hoping to leave with our audience?
Well, I hope we can, have this bridge built between the science and the community, this built environment sector. Try to each understand from each other, what is the impacts, but what is also the business, and how scientists can help the sector, what kind of data they need, what kind of analysis they need. Each sector has a different needs and different decision that they have to make. So I hope, for me is to start to build this bridge and to advocate for them to go to experts, to interact with experts in Ireland, for example, or in other countries, and try to read the data, the climate data, and see how they can design and build the building to be more sustainable.
One question that just comes to mind that we hadn't talked about before this, again, because it was something I saw just literally before we're recording. In the UK, it's now going to be a biodiversity challenge for house builders and developers, because by the end of this year, they're going to be required to provide a 10% net gain in biodiversity. Do you think 10% is enough? Just throwing it out there.
Not really.
No, nor did I.
But if this is the first step, yes, this is welcome, of course.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, from 0 to 10 is already something. And
sure.
And let's be more ambitious in the future, but why not? I mean, this is, I think, a good step forward.
This is Constructive Voices.
So there you go then, Pete. We've heard from Roberta, and actually still to come in this episode, we're going to hear from some of the experts that you'll be able to meet on our roundtable event at the end of the month. But on what Roberta said there, I mean, it's fascinating to hear somebody with so much expertise in their particular field talking about how important it is that we take action on this.
Yeah, so again, Roberta has approached the subject in a very honest perspective. It's about recording scientifically what effects have been happening. The proof is there. The planet has got warmer. There's no doubt about that anymore. We need to now take action, and the proof is there for people to be able to look at this. So, I think it's very clear to see that people like Roberta and people within the industry have put the time and put the effort, and have, obviously there's been financial input to get to this point where, now proper decisions can be made based off legitimate information, and everything that we have seen and heard to this date is showing that we need to make changes. And it's how quickly we make those changes and how effective those changes and the decisions that we make to change in the right way within our industry and within the way that we live is going to have a direct effect on how successful we are in this climate change battle. And it's here, it's real, it's happening right now. And again, some really, really valid points delivered there by Roberta from lots of different perspectives. And she really set out a very good roadmap to how we've got to this point in terms of properly recording, properly researching in a scientific way and legitimate way where the planet is in terms of it has heated up. Records are proving that, and the effects that we're starting to see, the loss of ecology, and the effects then of that's having within nature, therefore leading to the ripple effect to how our environment is changing.
Absolutely, Pete. And, when you think about the topics, that have been big in the last couple of years, certainly around climate change, COP26, COP27, what we've done is, on both occasions, we've come back after those huge events and we've kept the conversation going. And in fact, we've built on that conversation with the experts and making sure that it's not just those who attend those conferences who are speaking within those environs, but actually we're then bringing the conversation a little bit further and expanding it out and making it specific to the construction industry. And I think that's been very important as well.
Yeah, and we're going to continue to do that, Steve. We're going to continue to have more round tables. We're going to continue to have more discussions, and I think you put it nicely there. Continue the conversation, because I think there needs to be a platform there. There needs to be a destination that people can come to voice their opinion and to hear other people's opinions, so that they don't get lost at different events. That they don't just kind of get lost in a moment of time. That they're still there. They're recorded. They're on. They're on record, and people can relate back to them and contribute to them and can add to them and can continue them. And again, that's what we're doing here. We're giving our community and giving our industry the opportunity to have that platform and to have that place that they can come, have the discussion, have the proper place that they can discuss and agree or disagree, and make sure that the conversation continues, builds, gets added to, and then gets in front of the right people, so that the decisions are made at the higher levels. That, change is where those places are made. So they hear the smaller people. Not only do they hear, the people that are close to them, but they hear the other people within the industry who have so much to contribute and have so much excellent information and so much excellent research done. We want to be the place where people can put that out there, and it can be recorded and it can be looked at and again continued and added to and built until we get to the destination that we need to be at.
Yeah, absolutely, Pete, without doubt. Now, our roundtable at the end of the month is going to bring you some fantastic guests. We've put together a panel of experts. Let's hear from just some of them.
I'm Claire Wansbury. I'm a company fellow and associate director in Atkins, which is a big engineering and environmental consultancy. I'm an ecologist with 30 years experience, over half of which has been within Atkins. I'm interested in all matters around biodiversity. I primarily work in the UK, but colleagues work in countries across the world. It's absolutely right that climate has this massive headline, and we're not doing enough on that. And I don't want it to be a conversation about biodiversity being the poor relation of climate as an emergency. But I think just raising awareness of the importance, and also the fact that we can do things and that there is an international appetite, and we need to just build momentum around doing things about nature restoration.
Yeah, I'm Chris Gerald. I'm the Catchment and Biodiversity Manager at Anglian Water, so I get involved in all of the company's biodiversity work, as well as working with the farming sector to address the problems caused by or the opportunities arising from farming across our catchments. Because the things I'm interested in, one is I think we're going to be hearing a lot more about nature positive coming out of COP. So what does that really mean? And is it getting us into the space of measuring, like biodiversity net gain has, and what are the implications of that? I think that's particularly true for private businesses when they're going to be talking about their positive impacts on nature. I think there's an interesting conversation around the challenges we face to address the biodiversity crisis in terms of the supply chain. I think there's something about how we work together to solve these problems as well. And I guess I'm particularly thinking about public and private investment and how it can work together. I guess across all of that, I'm particularly interested in the water environment. So opportunity to talk about the health of rivers and coasts and lakes and so on, and wetlands, associated catchments would be great. But there's a broader point that applies to all of that.
Hi, I'm Jane Manley. I'm the Chief Executive of the Earth Trust. We're an environmental charity. We focus on green spaces, but particularly people's access and engagement with green spaces. Our engagement with green spaces and our need for that connectivity is linked to the three crises that we're facing at the moment, or is it four? So the first one is around biodiversity, second one is about climate, and the third one is around health and well-being. And of course, the economic crisis sort of puts all three of those in the spotlight with regard to green space. It's usually the communities that are most marginalised from our society who are suffering now, and their connectivity with green space is paramount to addressing all three of those crises.
So I'm John Veazey. I work at WM5G. We're part of the West Midlands Combined Authority in the UK. And my role here is looking at health and care and that interface. So probably not a massive surprise that my angle is about the determinants of health and well-being in our neighbourhoods and built environment. Things like air quality and health impacts, both indoor and outdoor air quality, and then things like digital and connectivity as social determinants of health, and how we need to increase those in our spaces and built environments, and then public transport and green space.
So there you go, Pete. Some of the experts who'll be joining us on our roundtable in our first ever themed month on biodiversity. They'll be joining us at the end of the month. And we'll be back with another episode of the podcast next week.
Looking forward to it, Steve. Lots of great subjects ahead. And as always, it's a pleasure, my man. Let's do this.
And that's all for this episode of Constructive Voices. Please take a moment to share it with others who may find it interesting. Follow or subscribe to get the latest episodes automatically on your favourite podcast app, and rate and review the podcast if you can. You can also listen to the latest episode by saying, Alexa, play Constructive Voices podcast.
Here's Constructive Voices. Here's the latest episode.
And on our website, where there's lots more information too. That's constructive-voices.com. Don't forget the dash. Until next time, thanks for listening. You're really helping us build something.